Good morning, all of you. Myself, Dr. Sarita, and today we are going to do the poem The Sea and the Skylark by Gerard Manley Hopkins, which is prescribed for final year BA English Literature students. Gerard Manley Hopkins was born in a middle class family in 1844. He was educated at Balliol College, Oxford. And Hopkins Hopkins's most characteristic pieces are The Wreck of the Deutschland, The Windhover. His notebooks edited by H. House have been published in 1937. These notebooks contain valuable and interesting prose passages. His letters, which are also very valuable and interesting, have been edited by C. Abbott, 1935 to 1938. Hopkins today is regarded as one of the major poets in the realm of English poetry. Although his influence is more technical than spiritual, yet his acute sensibility to beauty, his original metaphors, and his sincerity cannot be denied. As F.R. Lewis writes, the bent of his genius was so strong that we are forced to believe that his experimenting would have taken much the same lines even if there had been no Shakespeare. Hopkins belongs to Shakespeare, Donne, Eliot, as opposed to Spenser, Milton, and Tennyson. Mr. A.C. Ward, in his review of 20th century literature, observes the young poets of the new generation felt strongly the influence not only of Eliot but also that of an earlier poet, Gerard Manley Hopkins. Hopkins was a technical innovator with much intellectual complexity, which of itself appealed to young minds almost despairingly conscious of the complexity of the civilization into which they were born and of which they desired to be interpreters to the masses. The Sea and the Skylark is a sonnet, a poem of 14 lines. It was originally titled Walking by the Sea. In this sonnet, the sea and the skylark are described in the octave, the first 8 lines. These are contrasted with the man in the sestet. The mood of the poem is joyous in the octave, where he describes the natural sounds of the sea and the skylarks singing. But with the very first line of the sestet, the mood changes to one of gloom and despondency. The remaining lines of the sestet are deeply pessimistic. The poet foresees the total decline and even dissolution of the human race. The poem ends with a deep sense of loss at the thought that man is losing his identity and destroying his pattern. The theme of the sonnet is a contrast between the life-giving purity of nature and the sordidness of civilization that man is creating. The town mentioned in the poem is Rhyl in Wales, but the poem is not an attack particularly on that town or the Welsh people. It's a general meditation on nature and the man occasioned by a particular scene. Now, let's go on to read the poem and then we will move on to analysis of the poem. On year and year, two noises, too old to end. Trench, right. The tide that ramps against the shore, with a flood or a fall. Low lull off or all roar, frequenting there while moon shall wear and wend. Left hand, off land, I hear the lark ascend, his rash fresh rewinded new skinned score. In crisps of curl of wild wench whirl, and pour and pelt music, till none is to spill nor spend. How these two shame this shallow and frail town? How wring right out our sordid turbid time? Being pure, we life's pride and cared for crown, have lost that cheer and charm of earth's past prime. Our make and making break are breaking down to man's last dust, drain fast towards man's first slime. In the opening lines, on year and year, till, where and went, that is lines 1 to 4. I repeat, please notice. These are the opening lines of Hopkins's sonnet. It's a poem written by Hopkins, as I mentioned earlier, in which he contrasts the beauty of nature with the ugliness of man's works. Hopkins, however, was unable to consider industrialization except with overwhelming horror. He never enters into the life of industrial society and finds it lacking, wanting. He merely stands at a distance and condemns. His weakness in Hopkins, this weakness in Hopkins becomes apparent in The Sea and the Skylark. His wonderful creative gift assumes a slightly mechanical appearance in this poem. Both Sea and the Skylark are present in the poem in a way that only Hopkins could achieve. These lines describe the sounds of the sea waves rising and falling. The waves come and go, they rise and fall. The tides are controlled by the moon. The poet is walking by the seaside. He hears two sounds coming from the opposite directions. These sounds are as old as the world itself. The sounds will never cease and will last till the world lasts. These two sounds make a deep impression on the poet's ears. From the right side comes the noise of the sea, which at high tide strikes against the shore and rushes towards the ramps of the protective sea wall. With each wave, the water floods the seashore and then recedes, and this process continues. When the sea waves retreat, there is a lull. The noise stops for a while, but when the tide returns again, the sea roars like a lion. This process of sea waves striking against the seashore and then receding, striking again and receding, will continue as long as the moon continues to wane and wax, because the tides are controlled by the moon. One responds immediately to the movement of the verse in these lines as it echoes the breaking of the waves, and one admires the technique by which it is achieved. But the sea and the skylark are there merely as a setting for the rhetoric of the sestet. How these two shame this shallow and frail town. Matthew Arnold also saw and heard the rise and fall of the tides, as we did in the previous poem, Dover Beach. Listen, you hear the grating roar of pebbles, which the waves draw back and fling at their return up the high strand, begin and cease, and then again begin, with tremulous cadence low and bring the eternal note of sadness in. But Arnold reads the eternal note of sadness in the sounds of the waves. He hears the turbid ebb and flow of human misery in the sounds of the waves. Mackenzie, the critic, points out that the third line is a chiastic, a crosswise arrangement in which, for example, 4 words or ideas are so paired that the first and last to be mentioned belong together. With the flood or all roar or fall, low lull off. A high tide, the sea continually roars, while at ebb, when it is over, a quarter of a mile away, there is a low lulling sound in the distance. As long as the moon's phases change and it orbits the earth, the main cause of the tides, that is, the sea, will be found repeatedly visiting the shore. Let's continue with lines 5 to 8. Left hand till nor spent. These lines, while walking near the sea, the poet hears 2 sounds which make a deep impression on him, largely to stress the contrast with the frail, crumbling town. He calls them too old to end. On his right is the sea, which at high tide bounds wildly against the shore. From the right hand comes the noise of the tide regularly striking against the shore. With each wave, the water floods the shore and then recedes with a corresponding alternation in sound. This alternating noise will continue to attend upon the seashore as long as the moon continues to wax and wane. In these lines, the poet tells us about the song of the skylark. From his left hand, some distance away from the seashore, comes the sound of the skylark singing as he leaves the earth and flies up into the sky. The skylark's song is ever the same. It seems to follow a musical score which may be compared to a skein of wool that is successively unwound and rewound so that the song is as fresh as the one before. This score, the skylark seems to whirl off the winch of his throat in a wild ecstasy, not in a smooth or even flow, but as it were crisp curls of melody. Every note of this melody may be compared to a lock of fleece waving in the air. The skylark pours out music without effort, and yet he pelts his fresh song till he has split and spent all and there is nothing left. The skylark goes up so high and away that the music is heard no more. These lines contain a metaphor. The difficulty arises from Hopkins's two coinages here, rash, fresh, and new skinned. Hopkins himself realized the difficulty of this metaphor for the reader and sent a long explanation of these phrases to Bridges. Rash, fresh, Hopkins wrote, means a headlong and exciting new snatch of singing, resumption by the lark of his song, which by turn he gives over and takes up again all day long. As for the phrase new skinned, Hopkins said that the skylark's song gives the impression of something falling to the earth and not vertically quiet but tricklingly or wavingly, something as a skein of silk ribbed by having been tightly wound on a narrow card or a notched holder, or as fishing tackle or twine unwinding from a reel or winch. This Hopkins wrote in his letters to Bridges in the book on page 164. However, the plain meaning of the lines is not difficult to understand. As Mackenzie explains, on the poet's left, above the land, he hears the lark, which sings as it ascends until it is just visible as a speck against the sky. Hopkins was intrigued by the bird's ability to ascend in full song time after time during the day. It also sings while descending. Girls, this much in this video, but we will be continuing the sestet, the last 6 lines of the poem, in the next video. Thank you.